everyone to today's special episode of Be Freaking Awesome. First, happy Valentine's Day. We're so excited. This is one of my favorite holidays of the year, favorite times of the year, Valentine's Day and Galentine's Day. Today, we have two very special guests with us. They are actually the husbands of Be Freaking Awesome, going to be joining us today for our Valentine's Day episode. So why don't each of you take a moment to introduce yourself and tell us a little bit about you?
Thanks, Sami. I thought about this. I'm like, all right, long-time listener, first-time guest after a year. Excited to finally get to be on here. Angela, actually, today that we're recording this is the 30th anniversary of our first date. So Angela and I have been together now for over 30 years, where we've been at least dating, married now for 28. My day job, I actually am a software developer, website designer. So I'm really analytical, and what I do a lot of fact-based kind of things and analytical kind of stuff for me. So how about you, Chris?
Yeah. So Sami and I have been together probably, I think it's 6.5 years now. So I'm a sales engineer for a poultry conveyor company. And we build conveyors for poultry plants across the US. And yeah, I mean,
that's good. That's good. I would like
Today's not the 30th anniversary of us being together or any significant anniversary.
Hold on. As the mother-in-law, I'm going to jump on in and tease my guy, Chris, the son-in-law I always wish I had. But I think that your 7th wedding anniversary is coming up in about 4 months. So I think you guys have been together longer than 6.5 years, correct?
Yeah. That's true. We've been together probably 10.
This is our 10th year to be together.
10th year to be together.
September will be 10 years.
Nice.
Met each other in the Razorback band and never looked back since.
Oh, yeah. That's funny. I did not know I was going to get to harass you. We thought we prepped our guests well, but we didn't know we were put on the spot by not knowing.
What do you mean you didn't think you would get to harass them?
Well, I try to be kind.
Not teasing each other.
I was expecting to harass Barry. I wasn't expecting to, jump. I was going to let you mostly harass your husband.
I mean, as we always say, harassment's free, right?
That's right. We got to find a different way to say that. It feels so less politically correct in this day and time. Anyway, we only tease people that we love. I don't know.
Yes, you say that as well.
What are we going to talk about today, Sami, with our special guest for our Valentine's episode?
Absolutely. We are talking about relationships today. Go figure. We're going to be talking a little bit about some marriage advice, seeing if our guests agree or disagree and telling us a little bit more about why. Just getting some perspective on some marriage cliches and going to have a fun conversation about it. So
I like how you said that. Fun.
Fun. I think it'll be fun.
We'll let you know when we're done if it's fun or not.
I like it. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and start us off with our first marriage cliche. Want to hear from both of you. Do you agree or disagree? And tell me why. So the first one we've got for you guys. Happy wife, happy life. Agree or disagree? From your wives to our husbands.
Ooh, so, okay. So this one, I almost have to say that I have to disagree with it a little bit. You and I talked a lot, Sam, about how there are a lot of situations it's okay to be sad. You don't necessarily have to be happy. You don't have to be you don't have to do whatever you can to make someone else happy to make your life easier. There are times, I guess, that works out good for you, but it is also okay to meet somebody in their sadness. And sometimes you grow together as a married couple better, not just trying to please the other one all the time.
Ooh, I like it. Barry?
I would agree with Chris that it is, I think I've tried for this. I think I've taken that mindset of keep her happy at all costs. And reality is, though, the times that I have done that to try to avoid conflict, to try to avoid make life easy, make life simple, is where I've gotten in the most trouble in our marriage. It's the times where I've got myself in the doghouse and caused the greatest pain, I think, in our marriage. And so for me, it's one of those things that it's like, I'm learning that conflict and actually draws us closer in discussions and actually stepping into the hard spots versus trying to keep it easy and simple.
I love it. Both of them just bringing it deep right off the bat. So good.
I do love it. I want to pay $1 and say nuance, but I'm not gonna, because we're gonna let our guests. I'm gonna keep it with them. I do appreciate that both of you have come to see this, and I think if I could summarize it, it would be not making your spouse's current emotions mean something about yourself, because if you can like be a whole human and be there for them when they're sad, listen to them, be empathetic, then I think that being heard and understood and someone validating emotions is so much better than some bizarro toxic positivity that is peace at all cost. So I love that y'all both have come to see that. The next one, agree or disagree, the couple that plays together stays together. We'll start with you, Barry.
I would say I agree with this. I think as we plan, like in our stage of life right now, we are doing a lot more adventuring, a lot more travel, a lot more things. And so we're planning together what we're doing. We're having dialogue. I want to do this. I want to do that. We're having more conversation about it. And so for me, we're experiencing life together. If I talk about play together, I think about experiencing new things, experiencing new foods, new places, new adventures, even sometimes new discussions for us, some new conversations. And so that's opening up just new levels of seeing each other in different ways and trying new things. And so I'd say yes.
Yeah, I think I agree with that as well. The biggest thing probably is how you define play, right? So play doesn't necessarily always have to be, oh yeah, we're super active, we're going on bike rides all the time, where you go in and exploring new places. I mean, play can simply be that we're doing a puzzle together, or we're hanging out at the house reading the same book together, or there's some different aspects that it takes. And so I definitely think that one of the critical things in marriage, you interact with each other, and more interaction is better.
Wait, reading the same book or playing the same video game? Which did you say? I'm sorry. Go ahead, Sami.
We do read the same books together, actually.
I'm just teasing you.
No, I was like, hold on. We do read some of the same books.
We actually did just get done with one. Her book, I was actually reading a sci-fi book, and I picked it up and listened to it this last week.
I needed somebody to talk about it with before book club. And I was like, please, I need you to read this book. And I know you'll like it, or it's at least in the genre of books you like. Please, let me talk about this with someone. So he did, and it was great. And he generally liked the book. He had some specific critiques on it, but overall, like in the genre of the he likes. So, Chris, also, what is it that we say about board games? All's fair in love and war, and games are war.
That's exactly right.
We, like if we're going to play games together, there are no like, oh, well, you're my husband, so I'm going to give you a pass on this. No, you're my husband, so I'm specifically going to take you down. I am taking you out. Let's go.
And didn't you guys, like, I remember early in the relationship when you guys used to wake up before a lot of your friends did, when it was like, 6 or 7 people crashing in an apartment. And didn't y'all have like a little board of wins and losses, and you figured out very early on this was not a good plan?
We try to keep that board on the hush hush. It might have been a little lopsided by the time we got done with it.
We're not going to ask you to, this is not necessarily deep confessions, but you guys did figure out that you needed to make it more play.
Are you saying it was lopsided for Sami or lopsided for you, Chris?
We don't have to discuss that part of it.
Hey, come on.
It's just a lopsided.
All right. So our next question, next cliche, so to speak, marriage is hard. Agree or disagree? Chris, do you want to start?
I would definitely say that marriage is hard. There's probably different kinds of hard, different people, but if it was easy, it wouldn't be worth working for in a lot of cases. And I don't know. I think marriage is definitely a thing to work for all the time.
For me, Chris, I like what you said, that it is, marriage is hard. And if it wasn't easy, I think that's one of the things for me. In my life, I always tried for the easy things. And so early on, I expected marriage to be easy. I expected it to come just naturally. And as we progress in our marriage, it's definitely one of those things that it takes effort. You have to put energy into it to get energy out of it. But it actually, I feel stronger because of our marriage. I feel stronger because of the energy when I put it into it. When I've actually worked at it and recognize that, my part of my thing is I want to be the best husband I can for Angela. I want to be the best husband I can for my family. Because even teaching my kids, as I was watching, my kids are watching how I treat their mother. And so that relationship is also important for me. And so it does have, there's definitely places where I know I messed it up, and I know places I screwed up a lot. But other times, the one thing that the kids say, Dad loved mom. Dad's always loved mom. And they could tell that, working at it, you have to constantly thinking of that.
Mm-hmm.
I read an interesting counterpoint to this when doing research for this podcast that said to be careful because marriage doesn't have to be that hard all the time. And I think that there are some elements of it where learning to communicate well, and actually, we went to an emotionally focused therapy, marriage counselor to learn a lot about how our cycles work and how we kind of trigger one another. And I think that after we understood that, and our therapist would say it's not about communication, it's really about the emotional focused part of that therapy, that it doesn't always have to be hard. Like, it is worth working. It's worth learning the people. It's a very yes and sort of thing that when I read this other alternative view, I was like, yeah. Like, are there things you can do? Are there tools in the toolbox? It's sort of like, if you've got to put together something where you need a screwdriver and you got to do lots and lots and lots and lots of screws to put something together, you can do it with a screwdriver, and you can upgrade to a cordless drill and you can do it faster. And so in some ways, I think that there are some ways that we can upgrade the tools in our marriage that we can make it a little less hard sometimes.
Yeah. Can I add to that? Maybe just think of recently when we were in Europe. So Angela and I were on a trip. We were going through, we're actually in Rome and with some family members. And as we're walking down the street, I just stop, and I love taking pictures. And I'll stop and take a picture of something, and Angela will just keep on walking. And my brother-in-law would turn around and kept looking for me and waiting for me. And one time to Angela, are you going to wait for your husband? And she's like, no, we had this routine that we've developed. And that routine was developed though by working at it. We learned each other's things where we did put the heart in early, which makes trips easier, knowing that this is how I like to do a trip. She likes to do it differently. And we've learned to work our routines together, that when Angela gets to a corner, she'll turn around, make eye contact, and she'll point in a direction. So I know where she's turning. I know where she's at. If she's going into a store, she makes sure I know where she's at. So we always have this rhythm, but that rhythm takes effort and energy and work, but then it becomes easier too. So sometimes the hard starts as you're getting to know the routine, and then it becomes easier later on.
Mm-hmm.
When we were early married, one of our recommendations we got was to go and have dinner with somebody that had been married for 30 to 40 years and just ask them their advice. And my favorite, we had this sweet, sweet couple over, and they'd been married, I think 45, 50 years at that point. And they were like, oh, the first 10 years just suck. If you can just imagine that the first 10 years are going to suck, then anything, any bonus, any happiness you get in the first 10 years, they're just it's just an upside. Just get your mindset that you're going to take it, because she said, do you know that for 10 years, he was so immature and he needed to work so hard at growing himself, and he was smiling the whole time. And she goes, well, yeah, I mean, and I was immature and I had to grow as well. And I found out later from their adult children that they were both only children. And so it really had been hard for them. But I can promise you that Very Nice method of travel, there are a bazillion arguments that happen before we have this very sweet flow that we work with now. And so it is worth the investment, and it's worth the energy, and make sure that you got some good tools along the way. So next question, next cliche: love is a commitment, not just a feeling. Barry, what do you think about that?
Yes, because I think that I agree in that I love you. Actually, I mean, I love you, but I don't like you. I can't which way it goes, but it's like one of those times that I love you right now, but I really don't like you, with that gritted teeth kind of thing. And it's like, you have that feeling of, it's like this frustration, this anger. I feel like I definitely have gotten that grace as like, it's a good thing I love you right now, because I really don't like you. When I've made some of my bonehead mistakes and things I've done. But it's one of those things that it's definitely not just, I'm committed to loving you even when it's hard. Even when things aren't easy, are difficult, even when there's a sick child or we're dealing with something like that. We don't like to deal with those things, but I love you, and I'm committed to loving you through that.
Chris?
Yeah, I don't see what you're saying there, Barry. In my head, I was trying to sit here and think. I was like, okay, is love the actual commitment, or is love more of the feeling you get because you're committed to the marriage? And I was trying to like figure out if there's a different word of like, well, okay, so what do you actually like? What is commitment? I couldn't quite put it together in my head there, but yeah, no, I think it can be. I think the marriage is definitely commitment. And there are a lot of times you get that love feeling because you see, like, you're interacting and you're hanging out and you're just enjoying life and figuring things out together, whether they are difficult or easy, piecing through it with that. And, it's kind of like you mentioned there, Barry, no matter what, you always know that you can go back to them. You always know that you do everything out of love. And there is love is definitely a foundation at the bottom of it.
I am so grateful for sort of this idea of love being a commitment and not just a feeling. And it I don't know, it makes me think of the in sickness and health sort of thought, for better or worse, in the marriage vows, the traditional version of it. This past probably couple of years, really, not just 1 year, I have not been at my best physically. Last January of 2022, I had pneumonia, where I think there was a week where I just slept pretty much all the time. And Chris took care of Henry and took care of me and made me food and all these things. When it came to like, oh, is there a division of labor in the house? Or what has Sami done to show Chris that she loved him? Well, she stayed out of the hospital and didn't get more sick. I don't know. It just was one of those things where like, I'm sure it was not easy taking care of me. And I've also been on a journey just overcoming anxiety. And lately I've really felt so much better and so much farther along. And in some ways I'm sad to look back at things that I have, I don't know, probably harmed Chris along the way within my anxiety journey. And I'm really grateful that he has been committed and that, now sort of on the other side of some of these things, there's not like a keeping score. We talked about keeping score earlier. There also isn't necessarily a keeping score in this. So I think it's great. Speaking of scorekeeping, though, here's another cliche. In every argument, remember that there aren't winners and losers. What do you think about this idea of winners and losers in marital arguments?
I'll take that one first, Chris. I think for me, the thing was for a long time, I thought that if Angela was right, that made me wrong. And I didn't want to be wrong. So I would fight in an argument, or I'd argue over things that even when I'd realize that I didn't have the right side or the right point, I'd keep going because I didn't want to be wrong. And it actually made it a lot worse. I also remember a time where we had a discussion. It's like, why do you always win every argument? And I never feel like I win an argument. And Angela came back and said, because when I realize I'm wrong, I just shut up. I just stop and walk away. I leave it alone. And I'm like, you don't even let me win. So therefore, by walking away, you win. And so I still don't win.
I knew that one was coming. As soon as this cliche got, I was like, no, let Chris go first.
I mean, I definitely think there are winners and both losers. Now, I will say that oftentimes in most arguments, you do find yourself in a lose-lose situation, regardless of what side you're on. But I do think there are some arguments that, yeah, there's definitely winners of that particular bout. Maybe a minor argument, but there are definitely sometimes there are winners. People or one side that comes out more on top than the other.
I want to clarify something that you just said, because I know we use it for shorthand. When you said that there are losers, we talk about there are some fights where the options are 2 losers or 2 winners. There's not an option for 1 winner and 1 loser. If the argument ends in that way, where there is 1 quote unquote winner, that means you actually have 2 losers, because you have, in trying to beat someone else, you didn't accomplish the goal, which is growing closer together. So there are 2 losers sometimes.
I like it. That's a good clarification, because I was thinking of people I know that when they are fighting against each other versus when they make the problem the enemy and they both try to work together to solve that problem instead of making the other person. The problem's the enemy, not the person. And I've seen people that when they can get into that, shift into that mindset, the arguments become more productive. In the light of like what Barry was saying, is that we don't just peace at all costs, but it becomes a more productive argument. All right, next cliche, which I don't even know if I've ever heard this. So marriage is 50-50.
All right. So then that makes me think of one of the things you talked about in one of your previous podcasts, where life is 50-50. And as a whole, there's times where we have things that are good. Sometimes things are bad, but they all kind of balances out. Marriage is kind of that way too. Sometimes things are hard. Kind of going back to the hard question, is marriage hard or not? Sometimes it's hard. Sometimes it's easy. You could still be married 50 years and still have hard times. So hard is not just something you get away from. So it's kind of a balance. So I think, And even then we are lovers. We're not lovers 100% of the time. We're not 50% of the time. It's a balance even there. We're friends. We're best friends at times. We are, parts of life, we're roommates. Even it feels like we're, just like you were, having to deal with cooking and stuff like that and cleaning, and just like anyone else living together would be. So I think I agree.
I would say in the ideal marriage, it's 50-50, right? So in marriage, inevitably, there are times where people get upset. And while they don't want to stop working for the marriage, it's not that they won't work for it. They may back off to, I'm only going to put in my 30% this week and just kind of coast through this because I'm just not really happy with how things are going right now. I'm just not feeling like putting into it. And there are times where the other person may pick up and say, well, I really need to try to do better. So I'm going to put in 70% this week or something. And so you run into issues a lot of times with that idealist when you get to, if both people just start dropping off and not getting in 50-50 at all, and all of a sudden you're not in that ideal state, right? So that's where I say I think ideal marriage, yeah, you're both 50-50, but there are times where you maybe put in more or may feel like you want to put in less work.
So I have a dissenting opinion on this, but it's mostly just a different perspective, really. I think marriage is not 50-50 because I think it requires both people putting in their 100%. And if you are viewing it like, well, I'm going to put in 50% and they're going to put in 50%, and then something happens and you get sick or, or whatever, or even stressed or maybe frustrated at them and you like sort of passive aggressively start putting in less effort, it's just not ideal. But I think if both people are striving to put in 100%, I think you end up with better results rather than viewing it like I'm going to do half the work, they're going to do half the work. You're both putting in 100% of the work, and that will lead to thing. But I really just think that I'm just putting a spin on perspective and just like sort of a trick question, kind of making it.
No, I like it because we took it in two different ways. Because what Barry was saying
three different ways.
Yeah, exactly. You guys took it in very different ways. Because what Barry's saying is that you're not going to be happy 100% of the time. You're not going to be sad 100% of the time. It's going to balance out. Some of the time you're going to be happy. Some of the time you're going to be disappointed. Some of the time you're going to be just meh. Just life is 50-50. So is marriage. So anyway, you guys took it as like contribution and percentages. Love it. Fantastic.
Okay, so our next question, we only have a couple more. Never talk badly about your spouse to other people. Agree or disagree? It's not so much a cliche as it is just
advice.
Probably good life choice there.
So you agree?
Yeah, I mean, you shouldn't talk bad about anybody around other people. I mean, that's probably not exactly the nicest thing to do. Now, does it happen sometimes? There are some times where you get caught up in what you're doing and hanging out, and most times you don't talk bad about your significant other. It's probably a pretty solid route to go, but there are times that it does happen.
It's a tricky one. I'm like, yes, you obviously think, no, you should never say anything bad about anybody, especially your spouse, this person you love. There's times though where this person, can frustrate you, drive you crazy. You have to have a release somewhere. And so it could be with, I think, a trusted friend maybe that you actually have. I have one of my best friends, he and I will have conversations about marriage and events and things. Or if my counselor, when I'm in counseling, we do talk about, our marriage and the hard things and the good things and what's going on. So I think it's the right situation or with the right trusted person that's kind of like a person that you can confide in. But it's not this thing of saying, I would also definitely say you never would talk bad about your spouse to a person of the opposite gender or the same gender as your spouse is, because that can lead you down a slippery slope as well, especially when that person starts commiserating with you or starts giving empathy and all that stuff. That could lead to other problems. So it's one of those things that having a safe place, I think we all need that.
I think that the one thing that if you are that safe person, and you guys are all way better humans than I am, I would love to. This is beautiful advice. Maybe this will be my next 50 years. I'll endeavor to do this. But I have seen people before that lament about their spouse to their parents or their friends, and then don't understand why their parents or friends don't like their spouse. And so I think that when you're doing that trusted person, if you are the trusted person, like being able to separate that and being able to say, like, I don't need to have a triangular relationship with my son-in-law. Like he has a relationship with my daughter. And because they're married, that sometimes doesn't go well. And if I'm one of her closest friends, then she's going to share things maybe from time to time that don't go well. And I have to work really hard to just let that go in and out the other. I mean, hypothetically, Chris, if you ever, made a mistake, I have to let that go in and not the other, and also not be the scorekeeper. Oh, well, you remember the last time he did that, right? And encourage and support her to, I love the Bible verse to encourage one another to love and good works. And so it's like, also, if I can give her perspective and balance to that, like, wait, just last week, remember he did the dishes without you, whatever it is, if you can be positive and be pro. I can tell you that some of my closest friends are the biggest fans of Barry Belford, and they do a great job of being like, you are being ridiculous right now. And they love me and love Barry enough to tell me when I'm being ridiculous. So I think sometimes it can also, in that way, it has helped me when I had somebody else's perspective to be like, oh, maybe I am being ridiculous. Maybe I am tired. Maybe I am stressed. Maybe I'm not feeling well. Maybe I'm have wrong expectations.
So Angela, I would also agree with you. I don't think I'm nearly quite as righteous is not the right word, but of high opinions about this, because it is helpful to have a release valve, and it is helpful to have somebody to go to just, I don't know, keep you from having to bottle it up. And I think that there are times where I know I certainly get mad about things that I actually don't care to bring up to Chris, because I do know I'm being ridiculous sometimes. And that doesn't mean that the feeling isn't there. That doesn't mean that the frustration isn't there. And I can recognize that it will be unhelpful to actually bring up whatever it is to Chris directly. Like, maybe I just need to let the frustration happen, let it go, and move on. It's not actually something that is this like, well, we need to have a deep discussion about this issue. I can just call my friend and be like, can you believe it? Chris said this thing. I mean, he's super tired and very stressed and has a lot of things going on, but he said this. Can you believe it? Like, I know I have all the things I would say to myself. So anyway, I'm sort of like you, but I agree. Trusted confidant. It's not like to the world and to anybody. It's not pearls before swine. It's to people who you have your back and have your marriages back. All right. I think we have the last couple of just sort of thoughts. These ones are less agree and disagree about marriage, but really just some questions in general about things that our family culture subscribe to when it comes to marriage. So we're going to start and talk a little bit about why we think road trips with the person you're in a relationship with is a good idea. Anybody want to jump in with initial thoughts on why road trips?
Well, I feel like there's a lot of aspects with road trips, right? So you got the planning aspect of, all right, you got to figure out how each other plan, right? So are you the spontaneous person, or are you the detailed planner that's got the minute by minute itinerary? So you figure out how each other plans, and then you got the aspect of how each other vacation. Do you have the relaxer who just wants to lay on the beach all day, or do they want to be active, right? Like, so there's so many different things that come out when you're on vacation that don't come out necessarily when you're at home. And you learn more about how to work with each other to cope and identify like how to work together.
I think too, in a road trip though, you have a lot of aspects, especially a long drive. I know like Angela and I, before we got married, I'm originally from Canada. And so one of the things that she did, she actually drove to Canada with me. My mom paid for her to drive to Canada with me and flew her back the first time I went back from college. And so we had a 14-hour road trip. And on that road trip, you have conversations that happen that you just got to fill time. So how you filled your time. How are you at stops when you stop for gas? We've really worked down to where our stops have been where you stop. One person's going to the bathroom, the other one's pumping gas. The other person would then pay for the gas. Well, back then you couldn't pay at the machine. And so at the tank, so one person would pay while the other person was going pee, and then you'd be back in the car and we'd be done in 10 minutes. We know people that, every time they'd stop to get gas on the road trip, they're stopped for 30 minutes minimum. And so just figuring out what is that routine like? Is this a routine that you can do? And then it's like, is your spouse the kind of person that insists that they drive the entire way? Or are they okay sharing the load on driving? Because I know people that do both. We love to share that. We know people who they like to be the one in control the whole time. So you also learn is that person a control person where they need to be in control of everything? And that's what some people have said is like, I don't like to let my spouse drive because I need to be in control. I can't trust them at the wheel. That's an indicator light of what could be going on or something like that.
I think the two parts of it for me, one is that you will encounter something not going well. So how did this person handle stressful situations, expectations not met, that sort of thing? And the second is the boredom factor. And I say this because going on vacation, you can hit the stress factor. But with the road trip, you hit the boredom factor, and where you're like, I mean, if you've ever driven from Arkansas to Colorado or from Arkansas to Chicago, and just the plain states in America are ridiculous. Maybe this isn't as applicable in Europe. Maybe you go on a long train ride. I don't know. But just the idea of like just filling hours with nothingness, and can you have a conversation that goes deeper than just the day to day? I've had friends over the years that they met online and they dated long distance before they ever lived in the same town. And they were like, we date on the phone or on chat. And so because you're not going to the movies and the waiter's interrupting you, then they would have these deep, deep conversations and long conversations. And so they had kind of accomplished that of like, how do you spend hours together in kind of, boredom. But I think those are the two reasons why is you hit both of those at the same time.
How do they handle road traffic when you're in a traffic jam for hours on end?
Yeah, seriously. Okay. The next question relates to how do you guys think about your significant other's family? I know there's some people that are like, oh, I'm not marrying the family, or
I feel like this is a real loaded question for me right now.
Absolutely is primarily for Chris because, yeah. Not how do you feel about your family, but like what advice would you give to people in how to think about your spouse's family or significant other's family?
Yes.
Go, Chris.
Chris.
So I definitely think that, when you're getting to know someone, I think getting to know their parents and their family is probably the second best thing you can do, because there are a lot of times with these people that you're going to be in a hard time with, that are going to help get you out of a situation. Especially when you have kids, they're the people who will watch them for you if you want a date night or if you want to sneak off somewhere in the afternoon. You got to have a good relationship with them. And just like with any relationship, getting to know someone like that will just help you and benefit you for many years to come moving forward.
This is a tricky one for me in that I know it's important, but with Angela's background, I didn't really have a spot where I could go meet the parents. We had an aunt and uncle she lived with. She had grandparents she lived with. And so meeting those people is very important to me. But it was also kind of like trickier because I think for you, Chris, you had the ability to look at, Sami and Angela are very much alike in a lot of ways. And so you get a little insight into what Sami will be like from her mother as well. You learn things. For Angela, I didn't really have that. I didn't have a family member I could say, oh, she's like this person. She's learned different aspects from all different members of her family. And so it's been interesting getting to know them because they have different contributions and they've contributed different things. I love her family. We've not ever had that spot though, where we are having we don't live in the same town of any of her family. Her brother here lives in now, but when we were dating, we didn't have that. Whereas you were in the same town as hers of all her family, all her friends, everything else. So definitely a difference there.
I think that point that you just sort of brought up about, kids and parents can be similar. There's something about getting to know your significant other's family that you can start to uncover habits. What are I think each family has their own culture, and sometimes understanding, you don't have to understand all where it came from, but understanding how it works can help you understand your significant other more. How do they treat holidays? Do they have traditions that your significant other is going to expect you to uphold, such as waking up at 5 a.m. on Christmas morning? Sorry, Chris, that's a hard pass for me. And I'm glad that we are adjusting that family tradition from your family. But other things like that, there's something about getting to know them. And yes, you are going to have to go through hard times with them. It's not really going to be easy to separate your relationship just with your spouse and their family. It doesn't work out very well most of the time.
Yeah, so I think this is a good compare and contrast, because you have a little more traditional role with Sami and Chris with us, and Barry and I both have a pretty non-traditional relationship with our family. And, there's people that have told me like, well, you have to be in relationship with them because they're family. And I'm like, well, you actually don't, because I have found that there are people that are unsafe, that may be blood relatives. And so I have had to put up some boundaries at different points in my life. And, when we got married in Canada, the week after we got married in Arkansas, they threw a big wedding and reception up there. I joked, but only halfway joking. Was I like, oh no, after meeting all of you this week, I'm so sad. We live 15 hours away. And it's like, ha, ha, ha. Because it's, we all have our own version of fun and dysfunction. Right. And so I think
they really try hard to put the fun in dysfunction.
They really, there's a lot of parts of Barry's family that are wicked fun. And there are a lot of parts that I thoroughly enjoy. And probably I thoroughly enjoy because I'm with them a week of the year. If I get lucky and I get a whole week with them, right? And then I can kind of, everything can be entertaining for several days or a weekend. That is harder, longer term, day to day sort of a thing. So I think appreciate whatever you have. If you do have an opportunity to be in relationship with your in-laws, then treat it as a relationship. Don't treat it as a triangular thing if you're able to. I know there's people that their dysfunctional family lives right in the same town, and they do still need them for sick kids. And the parents are, maybe not fun and dysfunction, and still treat it like a relationship.
I appreciate the fact, though, that independently we have a relationship with Chris. So our relationship with Chris is not through Sami. Our relationship with Chris is with Chris. Mm-hmm. And so I remember when they were dating early on, there was one time Sami was out of town and Chris came for dinner on Sunday night anyways, so he was still part of he became just part of our family. He is one of our children, just like Sami is. And so we don't see there's not a difference at that point. And treating that in-law as not an in-law, as a child, and seeing them that way makes a big different perspective as, you're part of our family, period.
We're very lucky. It's easy to do that. Okay. Last question. Oh, Sami, you're going to take the last question for us.
Yeah. I was like, not really a question, more of just a affirmation from all of us to all of you. Marriage therapy is great, guys. We all support and endorse marriage therapy. Chris or Dad, do you guys have thoughts about marriage therapy you want to share?
It's definitely awkward. It's definitely some weird times every once in a while, but I think there are you don't know what you don't know unless you are told what you don't know. And there are elements where you can try to wander and guess what you don't know of how to deal with someone else. Or you can work with someone who is seeing a lot of different cases and they can help you figure out what you don't know.
I think Angela likes to joke a lot that, for us, we have his, hers, and ours when it comes to therapists. And so when it comes to that, though, it's really helpful to have that third party perspective, because they can, what's interesting is that our marriage therapist, our couple therapist is a lot more like Angela. So he can give me her perspective, but from a guy's point of view. And so that kind of helps a little bit more to help me see her in a way that I can't see her, because sometimes when we get into an argument over something, I can't see her through the words or through what I'm feeling. And so with that counselor, he's able to say it, and I'm not feeling this emotion coming from her. I'm not getting caught up in what she's saying, so that I can actually hear what he's saying. And it couldn't be the exact same words she said, but because I'm not tying the emotion to it and toward her, then it makes it's easier to get it, to understand it, and to actually then digest it and do something with it.
I have a big confession. So,
Ooh.
and I don't even know if anybody recognizes this, but well, okay. So let me context this with, I had my nervous breakdown when I was 24 and went into therapy, very intense weekly, 13 months of very intense individual therapy. At the end of that, then was facing like, I have become a completely new person, and I am still married to the same guy that I've been married to for the last 3 or 4 years. And so Barry joined me in therapy with that therapist for probably 4 or 5 sessions. And I don't know if my lovely therapist, I hate to say this because I'm pretty open about who the first guy was, but I don't think he was particularly skilled at being a marriage therapist back 25 years ago. And we know so much more. Emotionally focused therapy was not a thing back 25 years ago. But anyway, what it felt like to me is that he spent the several sessions going, now, Angela, remember, because of that thing that you have, then you need to make an accommodation to this. Well, Barry, remember, she has this thing, so you're going to have to make an accommodation for this. And so it felt very much, there were very few things that it felt like that he shared with Barry that Barry could do differently. And it felt a lot more like, let me teach Barry how to get along with Angela, who is now on her healing journey, which affirmed to Barry he didn't need a healing journey, that he was fine and he was perfect. And that's his story. But I will tell you that in all those years, we did classes on parenting. We did several small groups on parenting. We never went to a marriage retreat. We never went to a marriage conference, which, when you are in a traditional conservative Christian culture, is very hard to actually do. Like, you have to be a little bit obstinate to say you will never go. And I never would go. And I never would go to marriage therapy. I would never go to any of it, because I was like, no, I do not need somebody to tell me that I need to communicate better. I do not need to tell anybody to tell me. And so for many, many, many years, 25, many years, would not go. In 2019, I guess it wasn't 25, it must have been 22 years. Anyway, 2019, when we hit a wall and felt like we'd tried everything else. We'd both been to therapy at that point. Barry had really come a long way on saying like, no, I've recognized my need to heal. Then I finally tried it again. And I will tell you, the first marriage therapist, after the 3rd session, I almost punched him in the face. And we waited a long time to get in to see the marriage therapist that we did use for over a year. And he's a guy that trains other therapists. I mean, by then I'd already written a book about, a lot of mindset work and stuff. So, I'm sure there's some arrogance in there. I'm not at all claiming not arrogance, but just I'm pro therapy. I'm a huge fan of emotionally focused therapy. They say that it's 88% effective. If you go to traditional cognitive marriage therapy, there's a 12% effectiveness. So you literally, if it's not an emotionally focused therapy, you should not even go, because it is so disheartening, because it is so ineffective. It works for so few people. And I think that was what the difference is for us. So anyway, any of you that are reluctant to go, don't be afraid. We can change our minds. Miss Pro Therapist was anti-marriage therapy for a very, very, very long time.
And I'll say too, though, it takes a little bit to find the right therapist.
Mhm.
So sometimes you may go and you say, it's like, oh, that didn't work. That didn't that. It may not be that it's not the thing you need. It may not be that's not the right person for you. It took me a little bit. I went through several myself before I found the one that I'm really connecting with. Sometimes it was more, it felt like I was going out with a guy and we were just chit chatting things. And it was never like we got into things. Whereas my therapist now, her and I really have a deep conversation and we actually can get to different layers and peel back the different things that are going on. So keeps looking for the right one. Something.
We also did not go with our first marriage therapist that we tried. We switched it up as well. So,
and they don't take offense to that. They understand that can happen. So it's not like, oh, they're bad or anything like that. They just realize that sometimes it takes a little bit to find the right one.
Yeah, Miss Perfectionist over here definitely still had a hard time telling our first marriage therapist that we wanted to see someone else. So you can go back and listen to our episode on perfectionism from a couple weeks ago. Let's end our conversation today with one piece of marriage advice that you would have for other people. Anybody want to go first?
Yeah, I can go first. So I think the biggest piece of marriage advice I can give is always have perspective on things. When you're trying to make a decision, when you're trying to have a conversation with your spouse, when you're trying to plan around things or when you're working together, always think about what does your significant other need, or what are they thinking about that they need out of this? How are they feeling about this? Kind of that put yourself in their shoes kind of moment of what do they need to work together on this with you? That way you both can achieve what you want to achieve.
For me, I remember several years ago, we had our washing machine broke down one time, and the washing repairman came in and he was working on it, and he was asking questions and just talking. We were chit chatting. He goes, "How long you guys been married?" And by that time, we were probably like 12 years or something like that. He's like, "Well, my wife and I, we've been married 40 some years. And let me give you a piece of advice. We go out once a week. She goes on Tuesdays. I go out on Thursdays." And he was kind of funny with that. It was a really good, funny joke in the way he said it and laughed. But it was really, though, it's like you also got to have your own identity to it. I think that's kind of what I took from that, is that you can't be all wrapped up in us as a couple. I still have time with my guy friends. She has time with her girlfriends. We have time together. And, they make that joke that 1 + 1 = 1, that you have to come together as a couple. Well, you're also still individuals, and recognizing that she is an individual of herself. She is wholly and totally capable of doing anything she can. And together we can work things. It doesn't mean that I can't open the door for her. She can open the door herself. That's still something I can do. And if I open the door for her, it doesn't mean for her, she's not offended saying I can't, she's not capable. It's a recognizing that she is fully capable and I can still work for her and take care of her. And we're individuals. So really look at that. I think really a good advice is make sure you stay individuals as well as a couple.
Our marriage therapist said that with our history and with all that we've been through, there's no reason in the world that we should still be married. And
that you should still be married.
Yeah, we should still be married. We should still be married. And was shocked to find out that we have a great sex life. And I will tell you, Chris just got really uncomfortable because his in-laws were talking about sex on a podcast. But I just want to try to keep this really brief. But in my book, you will read that I had numerous episodes of sexual trauma before I was 18. And that was a very hard area of our life for me to heal through. And what my attitude through that was, I didn't want any more joy robbed from me. And I pursued healing so that things that had happened to me would not continue to steal joy from me for the rest of my life. And I've met people over the years that wasn't their choice, that they decided, no, this bad thing happened. I can't handle that. So we can't do that. And I want to be sensitive because everyone has I'm not saying mine is the worst story ever. Just consider, are you making that choice that is going to allow you to live a whole life and a full life and have as much joy as is possible?
I also don't think that you're saying that people should just get over it, move on, turn a page.
Nope.
I think there's a journey of healing.
There was a huge journey of healing.
Likely for anybody would involve some type of licensed professional supporting you through this journey.
Lots of discussion when think that this is going to go a certain way and it suddenly a panic attack ensues and kills the mood. And so lots of conversation, lots of gentleness and kindness from my partner to win that battle and to have conquered that. Anyway, that's my advice is don't know the things that you need to heal from and understand that they make you who you are. And that, if you had your foot amputated, you're never going to run a 40 meter dash. You're never going to be the fastest human, but how can you live in a way that is going to bring you as much joy as possible? Even if we all have scars.
I think my marriage advice for people is don't forget that you're also roommates. And sometimes roommates need to have logistical conversations about who's going to wash the dishes or fold the clothes. And that can be, quote, separate from the marriage. But sometimes if you let the roommate problems build up, they can affect sort of the best friend and romantic partner problems. So talk about it. Be upfront. Make a roommate agreement if you really need to, and be like, don't forget, I cook, you clean. I don't know, whatever works for you. So also be roommates when you're going to live together. Thank you so much, Chris and Dad, for joining us on this podcast, our Valentine's Day episode. Sort of feels fun that we get to do this with our significant others for today. We hope that all of you have a great rest of your Valentine's Day, Valentine's week, and that you guys go and be freaking awesome. Thanks so much.